Welcome to my talk. In this presentation, I'll share my firsthand experience managing an event that was entirely based in the cloud. And I'll share some of the good, the bad, and the ugly at the end, and as some form of some key takeaways. And that's it. Let's get going. So first, before I get into the agenda, a little bit about me. Started my career out in the mid-90s. Working as a network engineer at a financial institution. I think somebody said once you're a network engineer, you're always a network engineer, which also makes you a recovering network engineer. And I agree with that statement, whoever said that. As you can see, in 2006, I transitioned to the security realm and had various roles, analyst, engineer, architect, incident handler, things of that nature. And then from 13 to 2024, I've been in a director of security roles, incident roles, leading teams, some strategy roles as well as it recently. And right now I'm working as a consulting on my own, cybersecurity and risk strategist pieces. So, and I have some certifications. Big fan of continuous learning. I just got my cloud cert back in May, so I'm happy about that. It was a long time taking, but I had some time and I took care of it. At the bottom here, you'll see that I've got my LinkedIn profile. That is the QR code of my LinkedIn profile. I'm not rickrolling you. However, if you would like to virus total it, I would totally agree with that. And a little jab at myself. Yes, I've worked over 2 centuries, so I feel pretty awesome about that. So, all right, here's the agenda for my talk today. First, I'll provide a brief overview of the threat. And then I'll walk through leading up from the time that we, figured out this was happening, an incident timeline. And at the bottom, you'll see a black time frame, kind of like 24 style from Jack Power, if you remember that show. Like when the event started in that duration for that piece. And then I'll also walk through, and I've heard people say it differently, PICO, PERCL, I don't know, but preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned, the classic phases that are outlined in SANS. And then we'll end with key takeaways, and then follow down with the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, all right, let's get to it. So again, this event started in August, late August. If someone has a question, why did you start your summer vacation late August? You have to find me later and I will tell you that. So but started in late August. I remember it was a Thursday night. I was watching the Reds game. I'm a big sports fan for my home team. And I noticed I was using my really enhanced alert mechanism called Twitter. And I saw that someone posted this item about KSDB that was discovered by this company I kind of sort of heard about. They're still around, obviously. They're called Wiz, and I have a lot of references to their articles and such. However, I was reading about this, and that perked my interest. But before that, I just want to talk about the first phase of incident or event preparedness. And I'll talk about the nuances that I have for that at the end between incident and event. So preparation, I have this box around the people, policies, the notes, the procedures, relationships, the comms, and the plans, and the management training and training in general. So part of the reason I felt that this incident went pretty smoothly, I would say better than the average bear, smoothly. I was at this place for a very long time, and I had built relationships over a period of time with the right people, getting to know them through various means, having one-on-ones, and that got for me to build a rapport with them. So when I did have to call them, maybe Thursday night during a Reds game, they would pick up. Not that they wouldn't, but they would know that's me. Having our procedures, practicing things like that, and having our comms plan set out. So that is very key, and towards the end of the story, you'll find out why. Here are some pro tips I always do when I feel like I'm in the beginning of an incident. I always use paper and a pen or a pencil. And I always assume that whatever event or every incident or event I'm working will go to the court of law. So it's one thing I learned at my days working in a financial institution. I was kind of blown out of the water from that. I was like in my early 30s, and I was like, really? This may go to the court of law? And I was like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So did not know that. So, yeah, those are my pro tips for that. Moving on, we'll go over the threat overview here. This is part of the identification phase. So like I said, got an alert on my Twitter feed back in the day. I follow a lot of people on there that I respect, and other vendors and stuff. Not that I don't respect vendors, but people in the field, right? So this thing called Chaos DB was announced by, again, the Wiz research team. The write-up was really good. And again, at the end, I have a bunch of references to that, their write-ups for how they discovered it and how it's exploited, etc. My automatic feed was my Twitter alert. I was scrolling on Twitter and I found this and I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I like most people in our field, I eat, breathe, and live this stuff. So when something I hear a cloud alert, cloud security issue, everyone back in 2021, we're kind of in our infancy of that. Maybe for some of this, maybe it's not, but we're looking into that and I'm like, this looks like I need to pay attention to this. So as you notice here, that was around 7 to 8. So started reading more about what Wiz put out there. And then the first thing I'm like, well, does this threat apply to my organization? So part of having those meetings just with my peers and hearing things parenthetically and going to corporate meetings, you learn more about what your attack surface is beyond just your technical tools. I mean, we all have scanners out there. We all have processes to find gaps. We all have agents, but a couple of ways I found out that we were hit the trifecta with this threat is by overheard some things, and not that anybody was trying to shield it. It was just I heard it from different meetings and understanding the business more and building those relationships and having one-on-ones with folks. So in this case, the threat was within Azure, and I know that we're using Azure as one of our clouds. It was tied back to the Cosmos DB database offering, obviously within Azure, Microsoft. And one place I was working before was a big data warehouse. So even if I didn't know that and it wasn't on our threat landscape, I would probably assume that we're a data warehouse. And then we know that we do have a database, multiple types of databases there. So safe to assume that, but I also knew that it was there. And then the Juniper Notebook, I was meeting with one of the data science managers and just, you asked kind of the questions in terms of, hey, what's new in your world, things of that nature, any new projects. I heard that the whole company meeting, we're using Juniper Notebooks. I'm like, okay. They're pretty cool, I have to say. So I'm like, we have Azure, we have Cosmos DB, and we have Juniper Notebook. So does this threat apply to my organization? The answer is yes. I'm like, bummer. Okay, well, let's dig in a little bit deeper. So here's a quick overview of the vulnerability. I'm still trying to understand how this works. So how's it exploited? So essentially, you've probably heard these terms numerous times, but there is a thing called the cloud shared security model, and they're different for each platform. But essentially, they all say the same thing at certain layers of the cloud stack. The customer is responsible for A through Z or A through C, and then the cloud service provider is responsible for everything else, right? And so in terms of that, Microsoft turned on a feature, the Juniper Notebook, that they thought would help be a better user experience for folks that are using Juniper Notebook and Cosmos DB. So unbeknownst to them, what that led to was the possibility of remote account takeover. This is what Wiz discovered. And you'll see these little asterisks or snowflakes. I have a reference doc at the end, and you'll get the slides that goes back to all that stuff. There's a better GIF that illustrates all this. I just didn't have it in me to put it in there. But at the end of the day, what happens is the attacker is able to use the Juniper Notebook feature that was enabled by the cloud service provider, and then use that as a way to get into the Cosmos DB world and then get primary keys. And so for the Cosmos DB. And so you could also get keys for the Juniper Notebook for compute and storage. And so these keys are the primary key. These credentials, that gave the attacker ability to view, modify, and delete data. So, and I talk about more of this at the end. So, but beyond just hey, they're going to have the primary key tied back to the Cosmos database world. They have these other keys, and where you can do, obviously, delete is bad, modify is bad, but view and all the view, modify, and delete. You wrap that all together, and I do talk about this a little bit towards the end. And it just gives the attacker a way to enrich their recon, enumeration, and maybe put into their scanners. So it gives them extra adjectives or enrichment capabilities to when they're targeting your organization. So not happy days. Again, now we're between 8 and 9 p.m. It's like, okay, so what's the potential impact? I've determined, like, hey, we are susceptible to this. What is the potential impact? How's this thing work? Is it like super hard, super easy? It looks kind of complicated, but when you read more about it, and it's fairly trivial. It's not happy days, but based on the data points below, it is a high risk to the business, and it could cause permanent data loss. So that's not good. Like I said, it's remote account takeover, and just beyond the credential theft, tied back to the database, you've got the notebook and storage and things of that nature. And I mentioned the exploitation is trivial and requires no other credentials. So once you get the first ones, you're ready to go. So still part of the identification phase. I do have a link to that SANS doc as well. So now about 9 o'clock, I'm like, okay, I feel like we've got a pretty good impact here, but I don't understand the scope, right? Like I did log into Azure. I did work my soft managerial hands and issued a few commands to figure out, are we run the Juniper notebook, which I knew, but I wanted to verify. So I did what most people would do. I called the on-call person, and they're asking, Josh, why are you leading this? Why didn't you have someone in your team lead this? Well, ask me that later, and I'll take that later. But I don't want to get into it. But nothing bad for anybody. So, I contact the on-call. I went to the on-call for the cloud resource. They said, yes, I'm on that, but that's not really what I do. I'm like, okay, who should I call? And this, I've been in IT for a very long time. That happens. They say you need to talk to data engineering. So I found that person. I had a relationship with him. He's the manager of data engineering. They might have been called something different at the time. I'm not really sure, but something with data. And I used to have conversations with this leader as well once a month. Again, building relationships, understanding what they're working on, what their pain points are, things of that nature. I had a really good relationship, not just with him, but all the leaders at this organization. Just meeting with them once a month. Sometimes I met with them twice a month if it was a more, we had more work going between each other. But anyway, now you see this started at 9, and this goes to about 12:45 in the morning. And I know this went to about this time, 12:37, because that's the time I went to bed. So I do remember that. So he said, we need to get the database people on there, the on-call for the cloud database, because it requires regeneration of the keys to mitigate the risk, right, for the Cosmos database world. I'm like, okay. So once the three of us were on the phone talking, and there was a lot of input between myself, the data engineering manager, and the person from here, and we determined that we felt that regenerating those keys at that time at 12:15, the risk was too high to the business. And so, yes, I did take a calculated risk in not pushing that, but the information that I was hearing, receiving from the person from here and the person from there, and I have a fairly technical background, and I had good relationships with these folks. I was like 99.99% sure they were not trying to snow me, right? The worst thing you can do is rotate keys or regenerate keys, and you actually make it worse. And then if you do that, I don't think you could recover. I'm sure there's maybe potentially some secret thing you could pay Microsoft for to help you, but I would not want to bet on that. So, like, that's great, Josh. Did you alert your management? I mean, that'd be the right thing to do. All during this time, if I go back in time, around 9 o'clock, I emailed, text, sent smoke signals. For whatever reason, I couldn't get a hold of my upper senior manager. So, I'm a big boy, kept on moving through. I had all my data points. And again, I was like, well, this is the decision I'm making. It makes sense to me. I feel like I can defend it if I'm going to talk to the global CISO about why I decided, I said, we're going to wait till the morning, right? And also on top of that, the person who, the three of us, there was a certain person that we also needed to work with to make sure we regenerated the keys, not just uh, in a, I guess, less frictionless way, but also we make sure that we had all the databases. We had to run queries to get all that, right? So I would say containment and eradication. Technically, we did this type of work from 7 in the morning to 1 p.m. the next day. I had a scheduled meeting with everyone that needed to be there. The manager of the data engineering group promised me that obviously he would be on there, but he would have all the right resources on there. So we spent the time, I can't remember exactly, but 7 to 10 running some strings within query strings within Azure to find all the instances that had Juniper Notebook and Cosmos DB. Those were the two pieces of the pie that you had to look for. So we had the cloud folks on there, also data engineering, obviously, and then security, and I had my team on there. So, people had me on their calendar for 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, depending which time zone you were in. And, I sent some messages to my team to make sure they were on there if they could. Some of them had other projects they had to work on, but it's also a good learning experience, right? So at this point, I'm like, what's the risk? Well, the risk was low. So doing regenerating the key, the risk was lower at this time frame because we had the right people on the phone, and it was early in the morning, obviously, but also we felt more confident that we've got the entire scope figured out. And we kind of had I want to say a process, but we had the steps, ironed out, and then we started to share those out with other subsidiaries and help them as well. And then at the bottom here, I say, like I said, I treat everything as an incident until I feel like we don't feel like we've seen a breach or some type of service degradation from an adversary. So I downgraded it to an event, but I still think it's important to treat it everything like the rest of the steps and gather information, make things better. And speaking about that, I scheduled around at the end of this call, I was I don't know, 12:31 for Monday, because this was on Friday. Let's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, we'll have our incident post-mortem and document lessons learned, right? So, and all this time I am using my little notebook to write down key events, every 5 minutes, or something that happened or something that didn't happen that should have happened. So I always had a backup of that. And that's important, if you get ransomware on your laptop or your laptop just fries, but it's good to have that, right? So it's just an old habit I have. So I stand by it. So here are some overall lessons learned. We obviously need to enhance our learning mechanisms. I wouldn't say they were bad. During that time, I started to ask some of my friends in my peer network, and they were just hearing about it as well. And I had some friends at Microsoft, and they were just hearing about it, like some of the other folks. It's not that they were kept in the dark, but it was so fresh. That's how I found out about it, was through Twitter. So, I can't stress this one enough. Continue to build relationships with anybody who's in the cloud, touching the cloud, in any form of that, and also with your CSPs, right? There's always a few people that we've all worked with, vendors that they're more of a partner than a vendor, and they're willing to bend over backwards, and they'll do stuff for you behind the scenes. So those are the folks you definitely need to reach out to in terms of, hey, is there anything else beyond what I'm seeing here on Wiz's site that I need to know of? And I think I did ask that question. They're like, no, this is a really good thing. This is what you need to do. I'm like, okay, cool. And again, the low tech organic methods work really well in terms of knowing the threat scope, going to the company meetings, having those one-on-ones, always updating our threat landscape book. So it's a combination of that organic in the out the end. You do have to rely on your technical tools to make sure you're finding your assets or whatever that are missing, but there's always ways to improve that, right? And what can we do better? Automated fashion and features. I would say just just knowing like when those things come up and down. Now, I will say people are like, why didn't you just use CNAP and all these other Prisma like at the time or whatever. I'm like, this is way back in 2021, right? So a lot of those cloud posturing tools were not there, or they were not very mature. And there, I feel like there's a lot of things you can do natively within the cloud that you can do to get this stuff to alert when maybe features are turned on without you not knowing. I mean, like I said, I feel like Azure, Microsoft had all the best intentions of what they were trying to do. They didn't know that was going to happen, obviously. But if you knew that the Juniper notebook feature was turned on, you got an alert. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You asked the data scientist or whoever's using them. You guys use, yeah, that's cool. Well, at least you would know, hey, 2 weeks ago, I know that this got turned on. Well, now, and that may come up when you start seeing stuff in your Twitter feed in terms of like, hey, I need to really look into this. So like, oh, we don't use Juniper, but we did. So anyway, so I'm going to end here shortly. 2-3 more minutes. Put the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I know I did. I'm going to do this out of order, and you'll see why. So the bad, have to do a little bit of fun stuff. This is supposed to be the your typical hacker hoodie, but whatever. So the bad, CSP enabled the feature. It was a good deed, but it didn't turn out what the way we wanted. But I would say the flip side is we as the IT organization didn't have to go back and fix that feature and turn it off because the Microsoft did that. So actually, I feel like took 30% of the workload off of going back and mopping up those pieces. So that was helpful. So the shared security model worked, in my opinion, very well there. Unfortunately, the adversary had months to leverage this exploit. So that wasn't happy days. The cloud credential theft, I talked about this a little bit ahead of time on the Cosmos DB, but also on those other two pieces of the Juniper world. And again, they get the bonus hack of like harvest credentials, write scripts, run scans, and beef up their enumeration. So it's not happy days either. I just talked about that. And then the vendor recommended, we had to regenerate keys for the Cosmos database. So whether you're doing any type of key ceremony or key rotation or key regeneration, it's always a scary thing. If anybody's been through it, I know people test it a lot. They have their T's crossed or I's dotted. It's just scary in general for obvious reasons. You don't want to mess up and end up breaking your database. One thing I forgot to add in here, thinking back, I probably would have gotten the main SIM person on the line to see if we could have write a query. I know we did on the next day, but could they put a rule in the SIM to look for any additional type of malicious traffic or anything tied back to the Juniper notebook? Probably should have done that night. Yeah, I'm thinking about that. So takeaways to ugly. Oh boy, that's John. Look how no, it is John. A little fun. So the escalation process, it could have flowed better. I would say in terms of it took me 2 calls to get the lick of the Tootsie Roll Pop, but I did eventually get there. But when people knew that I was calling them, again, at the end of the day, I'm a director of security. They're going to take it a little bit more seriously, right, wrong, or indifferent. Not that they wouldn't before, but it did make things smooth a little bit faster to get that done. Knowing now, what we knew back then knowing now, would have been good to have some, ready-made like pre-IR forensics commands ready to go, templated out. So, we can get a test environment. Now we can use ChatGPT or Copilot. Yeah, I said it. First one to say AI Jen to hey, I need to find all these Juniper things or whatever. Actually, if I'll include some screenshots. I did do that for funsies, but I didn't put it in the deck. So like if you didn't know how to write the string or like, oh, how do I look for this attribute in Microsoft? You could use Copilot to kind of get you there. Of course, you want to test it. But as long as it's not doing anything too evasive, then you could probably use it. But I would test it too. And then just general confidence level stronger for key rotation. I mean, that's just not really tied to this event for me. Just a scaredy cap. That's what I would advise. And now the good. Look at this handsome devil. Yeah, I have to have some fun. At any rate, the shared responsibility model from the cloud vendor and the consumer, i.e. us, it was really well. They turned it on, but they also fixed it. And like I said, we didn't have to do it. And I took care of, I thought, 30% of the work. Very collaborative, not combative. I can't stress that enough. I know that my post-mortem report that was shared with Global CISO, there was a lot of love going there. That was perfect. I mean, that's the way it needed to be. between all teams. Nobody said this isn't my problem. Nobody said this. We're going to pull hands, work together, right? And I wish I could take credit for this one, but I can't. So we had a cloud excellence group, and anytime a resource or an asset, however you want to call it, within the cloud was stood up, there had to be a human name tied to that. And so that actually saved a lot of time. So looking at the databases and who owned the Cosmos databases, there was a name tied to that. And then when I was talking to the data engineering manager, it's like, well, that person doesn't really do that anymore. I'm like, what? Okay, well, who does it? I was like, oh, that was transitioned over to person X. Like, oh, okay, great. If we didn't have that person's name, like a real person name, not like SuperCloud One, we would have taken a lot longer to get in the role that Tootsie Pop, right? So, and it also increased my team's security skills, not just in incident response, but also just in cloud security in general, but also how to run an incident in the cloud and also what queries to run. And I know one of the persons on my team, I'm not sure if she's on this call, but she did a really good job showcasing some of the strings that were written. Like I think she wrote some of them, and then she showed some of the subsidiary in the parent company, like, hey, this is how we did it. And I asked her to do it. And she did a really good job. I'm still impressed by that when she did that. I kind of put her on the spot, but she was doing such a good job. I was like, why don't she should get some credit? So, and our IR process worked. I have done numerous tabletop exercises as well in different flavors, but never one like this. And I'm happy to share the 4 flavors I did leading up to this. And I don't have much time. So, but people at least had some muscle memory. Maybe it was gelatinous like my muscles, but we at least, this wasn't our first rodeo of doing some type of IR event that was multi-teamed. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I think I hit it 5 minutes. Again, if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, any comments, that is my right LinkedIn profile. Also for folks, I do have my URL. Again, I'm not scared. Put it in VirusTotal. It should turn up green.
This is a question. Is it better to rotate keys for the Cosmo DB monthly or better to handle IR? I would say rotating any keys is best.
Yeah. Well, I'll sound like the quintessential manager. It depends on your business case, the type of data. Although at a minimum, depending what it is, I would recommend at least a year, maybe 6 months. One, you want to do it in a controlled environment. You want to make sure the steps are all outlined, and then the next time you do it, you want to make sure that whoever's your primary cloud and primary database, maybe the same person or team. The second time, the backup person does it, because inevitably one time, one of those people who's the guru of that will not be available, and it's always easier to do that type of key ceremony in a more controlled environment versus when you've got minutes counting down, like every second's counting. I remember, I don't know, I remember John Strand talking about something where he was learning how to do IR, and there was a guy with a stopwatch behind him. So I wouldn't say it's that bad, but like, if you're getting actively attacked, and every second counts, you want to be very confident that when you hit that last keystroke, the key is regenerated or rotated, and you're feeling confident that it's going to go well.